Friends, welcome to the book launch for People of Faith, People of Jeong here at Knox College. It's a delight to welcome you all this afternoon. It's a particular privilege to welcome our students, of course, our faculty, our staff to this celebration, as well as members of the Asian Council at Knox College, and also colleagues and friends from other colleges in the Toronto School of Theology, friends from across the Presbyterian Church in Canada, and also the wider Christian community. You are welcome to our space and to this time together this afternoon. The publication of this book, People of Faith, People of Jeong, is the fulfillment really of a vision, of a lot of hard work, and it marks the culmination of years of research and writing by the chief editor, Professor Nam Soon Song of Knox College, and her colleagues, Dr. Dong-Ha Kim and the Reverend In-Ki Kim and Dr. Ben Kuo, who are all on the call this afternoon. And so on behalf of Knox College, as we begin, as principal of the college, I want to extend my gratitude to the group for this excellent work and congratulate the research and the writing team on what is really a marvelous achievement. This book, in so many ways, represents one of the core commitments of Knox College, and that is teaching and research in the service of the Asian Canadian churches of all generations. I really think that the story of the church, that the story of Christianity in Canada cannot be properly told without understanding the story of Asian immigrant churches. And in People of Faith, People of Jeong, the authors let multiple generations of Asian Christians, Asian believers in Canada tell that story themselves by providing a clear and compelling narrative based on extensive qualitative research. As I worked my way through the book, it just struck me that it brilliantly illumines the life of Asian immigrant churches in Canada today, and I think helps us all understand the challenges that they're facing and what their ministries might look like tomorrow and in the days ahead. So it's a wonderful privilege, a great delight to gather in this space for this next hour or so to celebrate, to congratulate our colleagues, to hear from them and to hear from others, and to give thanks especially to God who makes all things possible. Welcome, Annyeong Haseyo. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague and one of the authors of the book, Dr. Dong-Ha Kim, who is director of the Asian Center here at Knox College.
Principal Vissers and other distinguished guests who have joined us on this day, I just want to say how delightful we all are for your presence. This gathering is not so much a formal presentation per se as to engage our community, which is very diverse and many on this research and this book. But for now, I just wanted to just quickly share with you the agenda that we will endeavor to follow today. As you can see, this book is without merit unless we have the research background which Namso will present, and it will be followed by some brief introductions, and there will be a time for some prepared questions that the writers will be able to share with all of us. And then we have some special guests who've joined us who will also add some blessings and some comments regarding the work at hand. And this will be, of course, followed by the opportunity for you to engage the writers regarding the book and the research. So we will have some time for live questions at hand. So that's the general flow that we intend to go. But before moving on, I just want to say it's a privilege to be working with a couple of co-hosts in the background, Stephanie Hanna and David Bay, the assistant to the Asian Center, that we're all who contributed so much to make this happen. So thank you. And just a couple of quick housekeeping. I just want to let you know that we are recording this session for posterity and other reasons, and that, you know what, we're all through Zoom, and so under the circumstances, we're understanding that internet connections and other challenges are may happen. So I think the word is flexibility here. And if you find yourself cut out for some reason, it does take time to get back on. And at the same time, if something does happen and you need to depart early, that's okay. That's okay. So we don't mind if that happens, but we hope that you can stay around for the endurance of the session. Anyway, so just a couple of that's all I wanted to say. And without further ado, I just want to introduce Professor Nam-Sun Song, who is the chief editor and chief researcher responsible for heading this project. And so I'm going to introduce Professor Song to take over at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Thank you for joining us all. I will tell you a short story how this book came out. This journey took a little over 3 years. June 2017, formed a research team with Ben Kuho, In-Ki Kim, Dong-Ah Kim, and myself, and recruited Eunju Jeong as a research assistant, which was the most blessing. Without her, this book was not possible. We are so grateful for Eunju's help. We began working under the title Challenges and Opportunities for Asian Canadian Immigrant Churches with First and Second Generation Congregants, a qualitative research of members of Chinese, Taiwanese, and Korean churches in the GTA. Research sample criteria was someone who is of Chinese, Korean, or Taiwanese descent, adult ages the 18 years or older, who attended ethnic Protestant churches over 5 years within the GTA. Our interviewee, each from the first and second generation in the church. That means one from the ethnic language service and the other from the English language service. August 1st, 2017, we submitted an application form to the University of Toronto Ethics Review Board. It was approved August 31st. And September 2017, we submitted an application form along with the required document for the project grant for researchers to Louisville Institute. December 2017, we received the project grant for researchers from Louisville Institute. And Knox College and the Asian Canadian Center also committed to support the extra budget we needed. February to June 2018, completed 30 lay interviews. And then July to November 2018, analyzed the lay interview materials using QSL International Program 10, and also assisted by Professor Planchuk at OEG. December 2018, amended our research to include clergy from the same ethnic churches we interviewed the lay. January to March 2019, completed 20 clergy interviews. March to April 2019, analyzed the clergy interview materials using the same program. And April 29, 2019, held a public forum on the findings of our research. After the public forum, May 2019, research team decided to publish a book on the findings of the research entitled People of Faith, People of Jeong, Asian Canadian Churches of Today for Tomorrow. Team recruited Dr. Allen Lai and Reverend Wes Chang to write Chinese Canadian and Taiwanese Canadian immigrant church history. Also, team asked Dr. Reverend Wang Yin to write forward, and Dr. Reverend Wang Yin graciously agreed to write forward. June 2019, submitted a new book proposal to Ifrit and Stock Publisher, was accepted early August 2019. And January 31st, 2020, the book manuscript was completed and submitted to the publisher. July 6, 2020, the book People of Faith, People of Jeong, Asian Canadian Churches of Today for Tomorrow was born thanks to the help of many friends and colleagues. Our research team is indebted to all those who contributed to this project in various ways. Thank you for working with us from the day one. Thank you.
Okay, Professor Song, thank you so much for the background information regarding the project, and that helps set the context in which this book came to be. Before we move on to hear the writer speak, I just want to say, you know what, I think it's customary that we have a little toast to the launch of this book, as you would launch a ship. So please join me as we, if you don't have a glass of water or anything, don't worry about it. Just raise your hand if you'd like. A toast to the launch of the book, People of Jeong. Just a beginning, I think, for many good things to follow from the work of this book. So cheers to all of you, those who have supported us in many ways. So here you go.
Cheers.
Cheers. It's a bit early in the day for the red stuff, so white water should do. Thank you, thank you. What I want to do right now is introduce you to a special gentleman, Reverend Sujin Chang. He is the, yes, Sujin.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sujin Chang, and I'm the chair of Asian Center Council. About 6 years ago, the Asian Center has changed its focus to be a research center to provide visions and directions for the Asian Canadian churches. So today's book launch is the result of such vision. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce the authors of the book we are gathered today to celebrate its launching. First, Dr. Namsoon Song. Dr. Song is Ewart Professor of Christian Education at Knox College. Dr. Song is the main person who spearheaded this project and took care of all aspects of publication of today's book. Dr. Song was the director for Asian Center from 2000 to 2017. Let me introduce Reverend Dr. Allen Lai. Reverend Lai is minister at South Arm United Church in Richmond, British Columbia. And Reverend Lai wrote the first chapter of the book about the history of Chinese immigrant church in Canada. Next person is Dr. Ben Kuo, who is a professor of clinical psychology at University of Windsor, Ontario. And Dr. Kuo is a licensed psychologist who has more than 25 years of clinical experience. Let me introduce Reverend Inky Kim. Reverend Kim became an ordained minister of the Presbyterian Church in Canada in 1987. Reverend Kim is senior minister at St. Timothy Presbyterian Church in Toronto, serving the same church from 1996. Lastly, let me introduce Reverend Dr. Donghwa Kim. Dr. Kim is the Director of Basic Degree Studies and the Director of the Asian Center at Knox College. Dr. Kim is also an ordained minister of the Word and Sacrament within the Presbyterian Church in Canada. Dr. Kim became the director for the Asian Center from July 2017. Let us give our warm welcome to all of them. Welcome.
Thank you, Reverend Sujin Chung, for your gracious introduction. I should just comment that the picture that you see of me is a little different from what you see here right now, and I'd be accused of not being factual about some things. You know what, I have a good excuse. That is, it's the stress of the research project and the writing that's the result of all that. Anyway, we are going to go into the address some of the prepared questions and statements from the writers at hand. And so each of the writers have been asked to share some statement about something about their chapter and where the direction in which they would like to see Asian Canadian immigrant churches head towards now that the research is, this leg of the research is done and the book has been published as such. So we'll start with Professor Nam Soon Song.
I like to say my hope with this book. Through this book, I would like to see our readers gain a bigger picture of the Asian Canadian churches. But at the same time, I would like to help underscore the fact that each church is facing its unique set of challenges and situations. Therefore, we cannot recommend one single model of a church because the one size fits all approach here would be neither sufficient or advisable. Every church should discern a model of a church on its own, one that is most suitable for its vision and context. We think that the possibilities are endless. Some churches can stay as ethnic-specific churches. Some can open up to become Pan-Asian churches, and others can move toward becoming multicultural churches. I hope the Center for Asian Canadian Theology and Ministry at Knox College follow-up workshops and seminars with titles of the last 4 chapters, such as how to remain as a unified ethnic specified church, or how to have better communication between congregations, or how to become bridge builders as a second generation minister and lay, or how to move to build a multicultural church, things like that. I hope there are these follow-up workshops and seminars. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Song. As was introduced earlier, I want to now turn to Reverend Dr. Alan Lai, who's joined us all the way from Vancouver.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. First of all, thank you so much for the, actually to Dr. Song for the invitation to write this chapter, and also with the recommendation of Wen Yin. She recommends me to Dr. Song. And I was kind of shocked that I was approached. But I love this project and I've accepted to do this because this project is about the Canadian contributions. You know, throughout my life studying theology, I have read many books coming from the US, but this one is our very own, you know, in the Canadian project. So even though I might not be too keen on writing anything, I thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to write something about a very brief history of Chinese in Canada. If you read my chapter, it's basically a very brief recount of some of the significant milestones from the early settlers to maybe now. And I hope the people who read my chapter will get an introductory sense of how Chinese people come to Canada and what are the challenges we are facing right now. And there are so many. And I was fortunate to have, because Chinese in Canada have a rather long history. So the literatures that I'm able to find were actually a lot. And so I hope people will find what I have done helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Lai, for that thoughtful message. I want to turn to Dr. Ben Kuo, who's joining us from Windsor, Ontario.
Good afternoon, everyone. Blessing to you. I see some of you waving. I wanted to, first of all, I wanted to thank my partner on this project, Nansum, Dongha, and Inki. I think I'm grateful for the opportunity to think through a lot of these challenges we have as we kind of pull ourselves together and struggling to think of how we do this project. And through the process, I have a lot of wonderful memories, and then we kind of work through as a team. So I want to thank you for being a partner on this project, and of course to God for giving us this partnership. And I also want to thank you, many of the individuals actually I see on the screen. I can call you out, a lot of old friends that I see on this call. And many of you have been a part of my journey as a member of Taiwanese Canadian churches. So you have made contribution in my own development, spiritual, social, in many ways. So I want to welcome you and acknowledge you. The chapter that I wrote, 2 chapters. One is co-authored with Reverend Wes Chang on the history of Taiwanese Canadian churches in Toronto, particularly. The other one is about communication across intergenerational gaps, cultural gaps between 2 generations, first and the second generation. And my intent in those chapters were actually, for one, to really take a stock of what the Taiwanese histories looked like, even though it's been only since the 1960s. That chapter, as I dig through the history and realized there were a lot of challenges, there were a lot of conflicts. But also I realized the important thing is that Asian churches, including Taiwanese church, Chinese church, Korean churches, are resilient because Asian immigrants are incredibly resilient, God-following individuals and communities. And so I walk away with a mixed feeling. There were a lot of sadness looking at conflicts, but also joy as well, like how churches have gone through difficulty, adversities, and still are persisting and trying their best. In my communication chapter, I have as I was doing research, it was quite interesting because for me, communication is one of the experiences that writing that chapter isn't just an academic paper, but it's almost like reading those participants' stories and their narratives. Many of them spoke to my own experiences, either people that I've worked with in churches or my personal observation or the impact on me. So it feels very, very much at home, even though some of the narratives were difficult to read. Others are, again, very enlightening and very, very joyful to read. In that chapter, what I was trying to do is that I'm seeing parallels with some of the challenges that are faced by Asian Canadian churches, not only happening within churches, but we see that also within homes. So I draw upon some of the things that I'm familiar with from a sociological, psychological, and cultural perspective in analyzing many of the issues that Asian Canadian churches face has to do with Asian traditionalism, familialism, collectivism, the transnational family phenomenon of really want to hang on to one's identity and trying to do that through churches, and the acculturational differences, cultural, how they identify with different, the Canadian culture versus one's own original culture. Those phenomena occur not only in churches, but at home. So my hope going forward with these chapters that more people will be able to look at these chapters, not just the chapter I wrote or co-authored, but all the chapter, to give them a sense of permission to say, hey, that's validating. I've seen those experiences, and I'll walk away with some examples as well as concrete strategy ideas to go forward. For me, my wish and my prayer for Asian churches is that having seen the challenges we face, I think it's important for us to really put down our pride and then be able to begin communicating, whether it's cross-cultural gaps, generation gaps, in any kinds of difficulties, that we'll be able to have concrete strategy to talk with one another in a Christ-centered manner. So thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Poe. Really appreciate it. If I can turn to Reverend In-Gi Kim, who's written a number of chapters in the book.
I wrote 2 chapters in the book. One is Korean history, but it's kind of a story or theological interpretation of the experience of Korean immigrants, first generation and second generation. And the second book is basically I describe the ministry for both first generation and second generation. And I think the church is a very important stage. I mean, church in general, not just Asian churches, but church in general. I think meaningful existence is very important. If the church is not meaningful to the people, then church, I don't know, we cannot assume that church will last. We cannot assume that it will continue. We have to provide some kind of meaningful existence for the people, meaningful service, meaningful lifestyle. The meaningfulness is very important. And so I'm always interested, not just in Asian churches. I'm not just interested in Korean or Asian church. I'm interested in church in general. Is there any model where we can provide that kind of meaningful existence for the church? And we can start with the Asian, particularly Asian kind of churches, but I think that Asian churches need to go beyond and then make contribution to the church at large. And so we start with we have to understand history and how history has influenced our existence, and also positive and negative aspect of our culturally unique situation. But we also need to go beyond that. And also instead of just following the popular model of European or American churches, we need to come up with a unique model that is liberating and empowering the future ministry, not just for Asians, but for all. And that is big task, but that is something that we have no choice, but we have no luxury not to think about those things. So we have to continuously explore together the future ministry, what it will look like, not just for Asians, but also for all people of God.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts, Reverend Kim. I mean, you're someone who's deeply involved in congregational ministry at various levels, and so these are very important insights that you have derived from the research and shared in your respective chapters. Thank you. I had the privilege of joining the research team and contribute a chapter towards it. I just want to say that the whole experience was not just meaningful, but I was able to see the transformative effect of the research, not just in terms of what the outcomes were, but throughout the process, just seeing the various Asian Canadian immigrant churches, especially the second and beyond generations, be affirmed of their struggles, their challenges, and to be acknowledged of something that needs to be done. And so that in itself, I think was quite the thing. And I do recall, as many of my colleagues would have, that when the forum was held with packed room of, not just the older generation, but all generations present, what I observed was simply their appreciation of the many institutions, especially Knox College, that have enabled this reaching out into the respective communities in regards to a very concrete matter that matters to them right now and that will impact their future. So that really was a delight to see, and certainly more than compensated for the amount of research work or the legwork that was entailed. For this particular chapter that I wrote, it's entitled "Empowering the Second Generation Leadership." The original title was actually "Children No More: Becoming Impactful Second and Beyond Generation." That was the original title, and the qualitative outcome of my interviews, I found that, what the younger generations are currently going through, these were really validating of my own experience growing up. Ben, I'm just borrowing your words there. So what I mean is the second and beyond generation in the Asian Canadian immigrant churches are really, solid contributing members of the greater society at hand, and yet the Asian Canadian immigrant churches, they remain the proverbial children of the congregation in a sense. And so the leadership development has really taken a toll in that sense. And so the strongest recommendation in terms of the overall interviews was that, what the second and beyond generation requires is the collaborative empowerment. It's not simply a top-down teaching, but rather almost a partnership and yet empowerment, so that the next generation does take on in participation at all levels. And given the COVID-19 situation, I think what a lot of the congregations are finding is that they more than ever depend on the second and beyond generation to make this work, and that's just a hard reality. And so COVID-19 has really expedited the urgency of that situation and hopefully strengthened the need to have a collaborative empowerment worked out amongst the relationships between the ethnic first generation and the second and beyond generation. Anyway, so overall, very thankful about the opportunities and the ability to work such great colleagues at hand. So thank you all. Now, what's a book launch without having actually a taste of some of the good parts of the book? So what I'm going to do is turn to Professor Song, who will share some of the pertinent passages from throughout the book. So selections. So Professor Song, take it away, please.
Here are some passages I selected. No matter what happens on Sunday, they would come to church, even under the rainstorms or blizzards. They are so loyal to the church. They love the church so much, which means they love God so much. It is indeed a strong faith that is represented by Asian Canadian congregants. How strongly we trust in God and how loyal we are to God. Faith is our shelter in this strange land, and God was and is our refuge from the hardship we experience as ethnic immigrants in a land so different from where we have come from. At church, it's easier to connect with people just because, well, like you are the same ethnicity, and there's already a sense of closeness. I think even if I were to switch churches, I would still choose Korean church. I don't know what it is. I can't really put my finger on it, but there is something familiar and core to me, what I want to keep. We listen, Jeong, in what Anne says, a sense of closeness I feel, and in Susan's word, there is something familiar and core. Jeong can be found in these words, something the interviews can't put a finger on, but something nevertheless core to them. We sense the flow of Jeong from not only these stories, but also from all other stories we heard. Born out of qualitative research, this book offers an opportunity for ACIC to engage with each other in critical dialogue, reflection, and self-examination about their present demographic, social, cultural, and spiritual qualities, and to further envision their future at a practical level. To complicate the matter further, some insisted the meaning of Chineseness must include the ability to speak and understand Chinese. If one is not capable in this regard, one may not be regarded as a real Chinese. The debate concerning who is Chinese and what constitutes Chinese continues. With respect to the future directions of Taiwanese immigrant churches in Canada, immigrant churches must ask what purposes and roles would Taiwanese immigrant churches serve and play into the coming decades. In the Korean Canadian church history, it is significant to note that the churches were founded by Korean Canadian themselves, including the ordained Korean Canadian pastors. Interview: wow, they worship through internet at home? Suhi: yes, they can watch the service at home. Interviewer: I heard about that too. That might be a new trend. Suhi: I can see that the church in a building is not going to be the norm in the future. I think even if we don't have a church building, it does not mean that we don't have a church. Thus, for many members of English-speaking second and third generations, the church is more than a religious institution. It is their home, albeit in a different sense from the ethnic language-speaking first generation. It is their own safe place, a sanctuary for cultural solidarity. Deborah, a second generation interview says, I feel rooted here. However, the intergenerational cultural conflicts between congregations can sometimes stem from the view of English-speaking second generation youth and young people that the role and function of their churches should serve purely as a place of worship and spiritual learning, as opposed to an institution of cultural conservation and social connection. Filling the vacuum of spiritual yearning and the sense of direction for the second and beyond generation ACIC, without a doubt, requires a special category of church leadership. EM pastor reduces the cultural gap by becoming the bridge builder between two cultures. Nevertheless, Asian Canadian immigrant churches are well equipped to strive for multi-ethnic, multicultural congregation due to our own experiences living as ethnic minorities in Canada and certain characteristics of our Asianness. Thank you.
Professor Song, thank you for actually doing a lot of the work going through and finding these suitable passages to share with us today. Thank you. We are very thankful to have a couple of guests who have been very willing to share some thoughts with us regarding this work. Let me first turn to Professor Hye-Ran Kim Craig. She is the graduate degree director, and the Timothy In Memorial Church Associate Professor of Preaching at Emmanuel College, Toronto School of Theology, University of Toronto. Professor Kim Craig, welcome. And it's I know this is a very busy time for you and all the other faculty members of TST, but you've graduated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kim. This is a real honor to be a part of this celebration. It's really exciting and wonderful to gather with this occasion. So thank you for inviting me and have a few words of the congratulations as well as some thoughts about this book. There are many areas of thought that contributors illuminate in this book. You know, this book is one of its kind and one of its first. Certainly very Canadian, very Asian, very Christian, and very diasporic. I had the privilege to endorse this book a few months ago, and as I read the manuscript before it was yet published, I realized how many people were involved in giving birth to this book. You know, from writers, researchers, interviewees who represent so many family members as well as church communities. This collectivity and communal efforts made in this book is truly remarkable. So I know that it is impossible to capture all this beauty in its intricacy presented in this book. However, let me just name just three things that also share with a prefix inter, with the hope that my three offerings here resonate with your journey of faith and your own community. First, I would like to highlight the inter-ethnic contribution that the authors explore as they share their own particular ethnic identities, and in that process, discover joys and sorrows that emerge from their distinctive ethnic faith communities. I really appreciated reading their particular stories. Some of them are heartbreaking stories, and they're very situated experiences, very profound. These differences, among Korean, Taiwanese, and Chinese are important because it complicates a dominant discourse on Asians as a Western gaze tends to homogenize diverse ethnic groups from Asia and thereby create some kind of stereotypes and essentialization. Secondly, the book beautifully and painfully captures intergenerational challenges and promises. Attention to intergenerational issues is one of the unique and particular contributions of Asian North American theologians and educators have made to the very discussion of the dynamics of faith communities. And I would say this is unique and really great contribution is because of our particular immigrant histories and that diasporic liminal identities. The book, People of Faith, People of Jeong, Qing, builds in a really powerful, heartbreaking way on this contribution. Thirdly, the book presents an insight on heterogeneous, interlingual wisdom. The very title, People of Faith, People of Jeong, Qing, captures this. What language do we speak when we talk about faith? Where do culture and our mother tongue fit into our confession of faith? And how do they shape our religious and theological language? This is a really important theme throughout in the book that helpfully explores. I'm convinced that these intersecting insights, along with many other insights that this book offers, will reach out to other different faith communities, whether Asian or non-Asian, whether Christian or even non-Christian, in a very meaningful way. So to conclude my brief remark, I would like to pose two questions that I think may be helpful in expanding the discussion of the nature and the history of Asian communities of faith in Canadian context. The first question is how the insights of this book can be applied to rural and a smaller city context where Asian ethnic communities are extremely small and therefore much more marginalized. I also wonder if and how the materials beautifully presented in this book might connect to other racialized and other religious communities who may have similar concerns and struggles. For example, I could think of Latina communities who also share very different ethnic backgrounds under the umbrella category of the Latinas or Latinx. And the struggles of their own intergenerational and interlingual realities, and what the authors in this book might have to say about that. So with my deep, deep appreciation of this book, I love to hear our authors how they see, their work once completed, now taking on to another journey for their future research and discussion. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Professor Kim Craig, thank you for those very thoughtful comments and certainly challenging questions, not just for the researchers, but certainly for all of the Asian Canadian immigrant churches that have participated in this research. So they will certainly be food for further work and certainly foundational pieces for the next step of this journey. Thank you. We're also privileged to have another gentleman, Reverend Wes Chang, who has graciously agreed to appear and share some of his thoughts. Reverend Chang is minister of the Trinity Mandarin Presbyterian Church in Toronto. He is also a member of the Asian Council. He is also an alumni of Knox College, so a lot of associations with the work and the college. So, Reverend Chang.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. With the connection, Dr. Kim just mentioned that I'm not only in the Mandarin ministry, but I'm also involved. I was a chair for the Toronto Chinese Evangelical Ministerial Fellowship, which covers about 200 Chinese churches in GTA, and we have about 500 members, and we meet every month. So when Nam Sun approached me about the project for this study, I was not like Dr. Allen Lai say he was shocked. I was excited, I was so happy to see that what we are doing about studying the future of the church, Asian churches in Canada, it happens to be that the Chinese church community also was trying to study, to have a project. I actually invited Dr. Enoch Wang, a professor of church leadership in Canadian Chinese Theological Seminary, to meet with Dr. Nam Sun about a project that the both sides were doing similar for the future generations of the Asian church. One is covers all Asian in Canada, but the Chinese Dr. Wang is very much on the Chinese side, and so you can see this is a common interest. Even it was related to the hemorrhaging faith in US. So we can see the importance, the issue of our next generation seems to be the common interest or concern for almost every churches worldwide, And just to let you know that Dr. Enoch Wang already finished his research and come up with the book called Listen to Their Voices. I offered 2 copies to our Asian Center Library in Knox College as well. And I'm also sending 2 copies of Our People of Faith, People of Jeong, to the Canadian Chinese Theological Seminary as well. I'm sure the Chinese church community will be benefit from this book as I have, I learned a lot more about the history of Korean churches through this book, and also I already know that there are similarity in Korean and Chinese, but I'm amazed that not only in languages or cultures wise, we have very similarity, but the issues the churches we are facing people, for instance, I learned the word Jeong, in Chinese is Qing, and we are both the same people facing the same issue, the same challenges. Our children have the same struggle of their identity when they were small. And we talk about the 1.5 generation or second generation, even third generation, you know. The issues we are facing are very much identical in several areas. Therefore, Dr. Bengo's the case of Asian Canadian Immigration Church in Toronto, I found that he really addressed the complexity of many issues that we all face. And Dr. Dong-Ha Kim's emphasis on the leadership is actually we've been struggling in many Chinese congregation, no matter it's many Cantonese, Taiwanese, or Mandarin speaking, especially when the church is involved with the English ministry, we all face the clash of culture Reverend Ingi Kim mentioned. And we are hoping to seek for the bridge builders Dr. Dong-Ha Kim pointed out, and hoping to move toward the multicultural church, like Dr. Nam Soon Soon has concluded. So while this world's background is continuing to change, particularly in year 2020, we watch with our eyes and mouths wide open to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the trade war between US and China, and even the election in US. This already complex situation of faith struggle in the future generation will be compounded with further instabilities. You know, I thank God and really appreciate that we have a group of diligent scholars putting their efforts to help us finding a direction proposed by this wonderful team of researchers. I pray that the Lord will use this book and guide those who really devote themselves to seek for the prosperity of church in the kingdom of God for our generations to come. Thank you.
Reverend Chang, thank you again for your very thoughtful and meaningful words to share with all of us, and especially with your level of experience at various communities throughout the Asian Canadian immigrant churches. These are certainly very applicable and challenging words to say. I also want to say that you know, you're not the only one who's learned so much about other cultures within the Asian Canadian immigrant churches. I have learned so much myself, and I'm sure others have, as we engaged in this collective research and writing project at hand. So, you know, if we're learning from each other for the benefit of our mutual future, I think that's a very good thing to happen at this point. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for our two special guests who shared some very thoughtful words regarding the work, the book in particular. Now, as we noted earlier on, we will allow some time to address or entertain some live questions at hand.
Before accepting other questions, I was thinking maybe we needed to give some answers to Dr. Heran, Professor Kim Craig's questions. Can I say briefly?
Sure, please.
Yes, first question. I think so this book's insight can be applied to any churches in Canada, particularly Anglo-Canadian churches as well. Uh, because if they read this book, they can get insights what Asian Canadian churches are struggling, and then also what issues we are facing, and also what we are desiring to become, what kind of a church. So I think so they can learn greatly from this book, not only about Asian Canadian churches, also they can discern their own church's future, which direction they need to go. And also if also other religious communities like other ethnic group churches or churches, it can be connected in many ways to other ethnic churches. First of all, I met one person from Egyptian churches, and then they had very similar problems we have, and similar concerns, similar issues between first generation and second generation, between like mother tongue speakers and English speakers. So they really wanted to have to see this book, and then they wanted to attend our public forum, but they were not able to do at that time. So all ethnic churches in Canada have similar issues, similar concerns. So we can work together if they read this book to 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 work together in the future.
Mm.
Mm.
Thank you.
Right now, the Canadian churches are really struggling with youth, young people, the
Yeah.
ministry for the young people. And then what Asian church is struggling right now is not just cultural differences, just it's not just about second generation, but it's also about youth ministry and then new generation. What do they experience in this very complex world? And that is what we are struggling with. And some of the questions are not all the answers, but some of the questions were raised. So those things will be quite helpful for non-ethnic churches too.
I also like Kim Craig's questions, particularly the second one, because like my chapter is on Chinese, but then going into the second generation, but then you read also the Taiwanese, the Koreans, we start to see similarities within the Asian group. But then if you like to expand beyond Asian, actually there are much more similarities. Say Japanese, say Vietnamese, even Italians and Germans earlier when they came from Germany and become so I thought the potentials are limitedness, and it was really a challenging for, I see the pattern really is the journey from first generation immigrant to the second is particularly interesting and important, because the journey from second to the third becomes kind of another issue, because the second generation is already so much Canadianized. They face another, like finding the roots type of things. So but I think this book is unique, that we address certain Asian community that is needed. Out of this like work, we can see future projects which involved, hey, let's do a book on the transition from first to second, if you like that idea at all, and involve not just Chinese or Taiwanese, but involving Vietnamese, Japanese, you will start to see there are lots of commonalities, and maybe we can learn from that. But I have no solution. I'm just thinking the question about intercultural learning is just so much bigger. But this book, I love it because we need to do it once for ourselves first, that we can see, do we have more energy to do many other things? I don't know, maybe you have.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lai. As you can see, we could have another forum if you'd like, but obviously we have to keep it. But those are very important points. I should just interrupt to say that I wasn't aware that Professor Andrew Park is amongst us, and he's had some positive words to share about this project. If Professor Park is still here, may I impose upon you to share some couple of words? Professor Park? Yeah. Yes.
Okay. First of all, I really appreciate this effort, and this is wonderful. And I haven't seen this kind of books in the US, United States even. And I begin to understanding each other create Jeong or Qing or compassion. I think this is a key to not only just a survival as ethnic groups, but thriving in Canada, in the globe. So you are showing that I'm really impressed that you have a commitment to your own, yet try to listen to others. I like the term understanding, standing under other people, especially second generation and also other culture. You share beautifully, and that's a beginning of our Jesus, Lord Jesus commission, love each other, loving God. It's not our commitment to ethnic groups or loyalty. Real matter is a loving God, loving Jesus, through which we can really build God's reign, God's kingdom on earth. And it doesn't matter whether we have a different ethnic diversities. It really matter when we give our love for each other. That creates diversity, truly thriving. I think this book going to contribute to that, sharing each other's stories. And we have to listen more deeply, listen to each other. That's going to create new paradigm, new vision of the future. And that's going to really bring not only love and commission. That's, I think, Jeong and Qing. Love and commitment. With that, you can create the future of our ethnic groups in Canada. I really thank you, all your efforts. I enjoyed reading this, and I hope I can promote it whenever I can. God bless you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Professor Park, for both your support and your encouraging words to the researchers and the writers to move forward on this, that we may share it with the wider church at hand. So I'd like to honor our time as promised. And however, if there are any other questions at all, please don't hesitate to contact any one of us, and we will endeavor to answer them as best as we can. So as I've said, I do want to honor the time that we said we would take of your time in moving forward. But I'd just like to say that this research, this forum, this book publication now, for us, these have all collectively afforded all of the participants to, I think, congregate as a symphony of voices working together to reimagine the future of the Asian Canadian immigrant churches, but more importantly, contribute to the greater conversation about the wider church at hand. And as it was mentioned, that there are so many similarities, both in challenges and opportunities that we may share together. Although this book really looks at the question, what is God doing within the Asian Canadian immigrant churches. And there are some uniquenesses and there's some similarities. Yet our hope is that this is just the beginning of a conversation and actions to take as the wider Church of God. So, and as was mentioned throughout the presentations, that we are so thankful to the many bodies that have supported the research and the writing, Louisville Institute, and certainly Knox College, whose faculty and staff, past and present, have patiently and graciously supported many endeavors at various levels. So we are thankful to our colleagues also from TST and other institutions without whose contributions this would not have been possible. As we say in congregation, this hour of gathering is now over, but our work has simply just begun, and we look forward to moving forward, both in implementations and exploring both in dialogue and other activities with our partnering members for the glory of God. So thank you, everyone, and those of you who've taken a busy time out of your schedule to be with us today. So God bless, and we look forward to having greater conversations with you moving forward. Okay? Thank you, everyone.